that I now announce our most awaited session of the event, that is addressed by our Honorable Chief Guest for the occasion, Honorable Minister of Finance and Corporate Affairs, Smt Nirmala Sitharaman ji. Madam is shepherding our Honorable Prime Minister's vision to make India a $5 trillion economy. Respected Madam has successfully steered Indian economy during difficult pandemic times, and due to her path-breaking efforts, India has today become the fastest growing economy in the world. An exquisite orator, economist, political figure and social worker, ma'am is at the forefront of leading economic reforms in our country. Ma'am, we are truly honored by your presence here today. May I request you to kindly address the audience.
Good evening, and it gives me immense pleasure to be here on the 6th anniversary of Insolvency Bankruptcy Board of India. We've also heard very well considered talk being delivered both by the Competition Commission of India's chairperson and also retired Chief Justice, who now is the President of the NCLT. So the substance of what has been aimed at through the IBC and the objective of setting up IBBI have all been very clearly recalled. The extensive nature of both their talks have actually gone into the nitty-gritties of what has been achieved, but more importantly, what is before us to sort out and to keep the momentum up, because it's not for me so much here to remind ourselves about how when the IBC was brought in and how in 2016 when IBBI was equally set up, the mood and the sentiment that India is looking forward to having a very reformed system of governance, particularly of companies and insolvency, and also dealing with bankruptcy and looking at very graceful exits that we can offer for companies, and that it is no longer a taboo to talk about company closures. Going for liquidation could be a good commercial decision, and it's not something which we'll have to frown or look down upon. And that kind of a euphoria was created because of this very progressive law which the Parliament chose to pass, and also by the setting up of the IBBI. Speedily, equally, a lot of energy and time and also considered way of strengthening the capacities by training the resolution professionals, also giving them good capacity building, and having some trainers to have resolution professionals trained by, have all been well thought through and executed as well. So in a way, 6 years, but work much more than 6 years has been achieved within the 6 years itself. So I, to that extent, give great credit to the work of IBBI and all those professionals who are very closely linked to this whole process and also to the institution that IBBI is. It's not going to be independently possible for an institution which is just 6 years old to achieve it unless the field formations, as they call in income tax and CBDT, the formations outside who have not got direct link with the board itself, but who yet are the wheels which lead the process, are also in place and are also energetic about moving this whole thing forward. So as I commend the IBBI, I also extend my commiserations to all those who have actively engaged to process this whole thing in a very efficient and also in a thoughtful way. So whilst I'm very happy to start saying about the way in which the progress that has been achieved in the last 6 years have been recalled, it's also time for us to put in place a bit of systems for ourselves to understand how to handle the challenges which are before us. Whilst I say that, and whilst all of us do remember 6 years is not a very big set of years to have achieved big things, It's also useful for us to remember that the birth of IBC and also IBBI in India was pre-COVID. Birth of IBC and IBBI in India is pre-COVID, but also facing a world which has got very different yardsticks now for companies, global value chains, and also the global disruptions which are happening, as a result of which I think many of the companies are facing newer situations. They're solvent, they're running business, they're going well, but the global disruptions, which have nothing to do with us in this country, which have nothing to do with our legal framework or the existing institutional mechanisms which help you. But the disruptions which these global developments are having on us is also resulting in a situation where many of the banks themselves are wondering how they're going to take it forward in terms of their clients and the distress some of their clients have started feeling. So in that process, I was very it was soothing to my ears to hear both the speakers speak about early resolution, early highlighting of distress, and therefore because distress gets highlighted earlier, seeking help is something which should become a part and parcel of our mindsets from now. I think the world is definitely looking at greater disruptions, greater stress, greater exogenous factors which are playing on our company's health. I'm not speaking of a doomsday. I'm only speaking of those companies which few and far between, but can experience such a situation for whom a timely and early detection and early help would help us to know how to handle it if it were to be a few more companies. So we have to keep our ears very close to the ground to know what's actually developing as a result of the global developments, because many of these companies are linked to their global peers or group companies or even small MSMEs which have depended for some technology or for some small amount of equity which has come from companies which are abroad. So I would now say 6 years your activity has been on one plank minus 2 years. 2 years your activities have been only to watch that there are no companies falling off the cliff in spite of the government enabling a moratorium. And post the moratorium period, also to understand what is the kind of impact just the COVID and COVID related things have happened on these companies. But post this moratorium, post the 4 years plus 2 years, is when now you have to start feeling what are the newer developments which are happening, what are the vibrations from the global developments and disruptions which are happening, which we need to take on board so that the process is efficient, systems are nimble, and therefore we would be able to keep our flock together, as it were, give them the maximum value. I know the principle which governs IBC is very much underlining the fact that we are not looking at liquidation, we are not omitting liquidation, but we are more looking at keeping companies as an ongoing concerns. Now, if they have to be kept up as concerns which are going, you have to have greater sensitivity about these specific nuances which come into their existence. And therefore, I was quite pleased to hear that realizing value, making sure that there is no erosion in value, maximizing value, have all been repeated by these two eminent speakers. Now that's exactly where I expect the resolution professionals also to be able to constantly keep that radar alive. Delay is the first big hurdle. Delay is the first big culprit in erosion of value. The greater the delay, you can be sure the value is junked. So value realization, maximization of value starts from the day one. And recent reports in the media, however true or untrue, of any delay at admission stage. I was very grateful, I feel grateful that the President, NCLT, has even given data before us, which should reassure, let's say, the media and also those of us who still wonder if there is an element of delay even at the admission stage. That's been periodically reported, that the entire process of IBC is slowing down. The entire process of NCLT is slowing down. Now, I'm grateful that the President has shown his figures to say, no, it's not slowing down. There could have been glitches in between, but here I go, I give you in public the figures. So, there is that narrative which goes on in a section that possibly IBC is also losing its shine because of these kind of glitches. I want all of us equally, me included in this, to be conscious that we can't afford to have IBC lose its sheen, and whatever it takes for all of us to keep it as sparkling as it was when we brought it in is all our duty. We can't afford, especially when Honorable Prime Minister is looking at next 25 years as year and if anything decade, and if anything like many of the business leaders have observed, it should be a century for India. It can't obviously treat its companies, particularly those in distress, with indifference or even with delay. And therefore I would appeal, taking this context in which is before me, that it is for all of us to see how best constantly we keep the IBBI on its toes, so that they are conscious that where they have to bring in interventions, they will have to bring in. This is a very critical area for India's economy. We can't afford to have liquidations suffer or early stress warnings which are coming up kept unnoticed. So I would think all of us, because we are talking to stakeholders are here, stakeholders are before me, we are part of all of us are part of the stakeholders group. We need to be active on this. Similarly, there have also been quite a lot of concern expressed about the resolution professionals, their ability to rise to the occasion of the cases that they are dealing with, because not all cases have the same stature. Some of them are very complex cases. Some of them are complex cases and also of companies which are systemically important. You may ask me, we've heard of systemically important being an expression used for banks, but not so much for companies. I'm using it in a loose fashion. There are companies which are very critical to the economy. And if they go down, and if resolution is not rising to the occasion to keep the value maximization in mind, speedy resolution in mind, and also give good value, the resolution value should stand out, that nobody can point a finger saying, oh my God, look at the banks, they have taken this kind of a haircut. Is that acceptable? And I'm not saying it out of hearsay. Every time IBC has gone through amendments, I stand up each time in the parliament to speak about why these amendments are important, and that we're keeping ahead of times, or keeping abreast of the developments which the companies want us to take into cognizance. Every time I stand up and speak, the first question is, haven't banks been given a raw deal? Haven't they been given a very high haircut? Is this what your IBC can do? These are questions of honorable parliament members, and I'm duty bound to answer all of them. And it is in this context I'm saying resolution professionals, their attempts to maximize value, their attempts to give good resolution package matter every bit. I cannot afford to say, sorry, 95% haircut for the bank is the best resolution I can give you. Impossible. Is that what we are capable of? There are times when the case could be so pathetic that nobody is coming forward to take the company, or even if you go for liquidation, that's the junk value you will get. But can this become the feature of IBC? Can this be the feature of our resolution professionals' abilities? So I leave it as a thought behind. I leave it as a thought before you. It is important that our resolution professionals are given enough such skills that they understand the complexity of the companies that they are dealing with. They understand the nature of resolutions which have got to be given. And it is important that if one resolution professional himself or herself cannot have that grasp, they should be assisted with many others. And I'm glad that I read it in the newspapers this morning when I saw it is already now permitted by the IBBI for institutional solutions, for resolution professional institutions to come up with solutions. So by that very feature, I would understand that complex cases can now be given to them with the benefit of multiple experts giving them the advice. So that is a very good step. Equally, resolution professionals will have to be periodically brushed up on skills, given upskilling benefits. One other area in which I would raise a flag, not so much for criticizing, not so much for assessing the performance, but the buoyancy with which you had IBC cases being taken up initially as soon as it was brought in. Probably this a comparable or a similar buoyancy I couldn't see on the pre-package for the MSMEs. But I know when we were really processing that and getting it to the Parliament and for having it pass through, the enthusiasm with which we said, oh, this is the best solution for MSMEs, nothing better. We brought it in with a lot of stakeholder consultations and everything else. Now after that, COVID, all right, after that, 21, now after that, I still find that the wings which are so necessary for this bird to fly are still not there for it. The pre-packaged are still not taken off. I would appeal to all of you, I would appeal to the learned members who are on the dais to look into as to what is holding it back. What is actually pulling it down? Why can't it take off? Why won't the MSMEs look at the pre-package that we've given as a good option? What's holding them back from going into it? I was about to suggest, even as I was coming here, that IBBI should now also look into the researched materials which talk about the experience of IBC in India, similar such laws in other countries, what have actually enabled some process and what are the learnings that we can take from elsewhere. But I'm so happy, in a way I didn't know about it. IBBI seems to have read my mind, but well in advance, and the book that has come out today of ideas, impressions, and also of implementation is just the thing we need. All of us do need to have, I was quickly looking at it, very good experts have written a lot of well thought out pieces. Some of the names stand out, and I'm sure that is something which is a good step forward on this 6th anniversary of IBBI. It's a good thought out step. It will be of great help for all of us. With these words, I thank the IBBI for having given me some time to share my thoughts. I commend once again the IBBI's good work. It's equally encouraging to see the other equally important regulator, the Competition Commission, to also be here. I've had quite a few comments to make of the Competition Commission, and I know the chairperson, Mr. Gupta, has been very generous to receive my comments without thinking that I'm being, very nitpicking in my comments. But actually, Competition Commission has also thought out of the box and done quite a lot of good work in coming up with a lot of proactive studies which have helped us to speed up the Competition Commission's abilities. So this is going to be an era for companies, for entrepreneurship, for building Indian economy, for a lot of flow of funds which are going to come into India, Government is actively engaging with sovereign funds, with big funders who can come into India and invest in India. You can already see the production linked incentive scheme and schemes such as that have already attracted a lot of investors to come to India and invest in India. You are going to have a lot of mergers and acquisitions, I think. I'm not giving any indications. Media, I hope, is not going to misquote me on this. Mergers and acquisitions are also going to happen because it's an economy which is seen as the sweet spot world over, because we have achieved a certain growth and are standing out as the fastest growing economy in the world. And therefore you're going to have a lot of investor interest. You would have noticed that till July you had a lot of FPI flowing outside of India, going away from India, and people thought, oh, that's an indication economy is going to be in distress. And as much or even more have started coming back from July, from August, let us say, until September. More than 70% of all of whom went out have equally come back. And our inflation is in manageable level. Yesterday, RBI's announcements have also sent a very positive message in the market. So it's going to be unlike any other times in India for economy, business, and also for investments and manufacturing, and also in service sector. It requires very robust regulators. It requires robust enablers like the IBBI, which has dual function. And it requires you and many more like you to be out there to help the systems to function. So I would appeal to all of you that you have an era of robust activity which is before us, robust economic activity, and as a result we also need a lot of good professionals which are going to help the economy understand how liquidation, how insolvency, how bankruptcy, all of them can be handled where required in a very efficient and timely manner. So thank you for being here, and thank you for inviting me, and I wish IBBI all the very best.